Hello, everyone, and welcome back to our NOS4A2 recap show titled NOS Recap 2. And I am, of course, one of your hosts, Griffin Schiller, and I'm joined as always by my great co-host here, Mike Johnson of Real School. Mike, how's it going?
Good, man. We did it. We made it through another season. I shouldn't say made it through, but yeah, here we are.
Here we are.
Another season. So exciting stuff.
We've been giving you quality recaps and reviews for the past several Sundays regarding AMC's hit series based off of the book by Joe Hill. Have to say that every single time because it's kind of like the thing that I do. But yes, we have made it to the end of season 2. We're going to be talking about the season 2 finale, episode 10, titled Bats. What'd you make of the title? Did you like the title?
You know, it was funny. I couldn't figure out the title. You just assumed it was about Wayne for the most part, but there was something a little more to it. So that was a nice little touch.
There are other bats.
There are other bats, and they played an important part. So
they did.
Yeah, nice little touch there.
She had her Batman moment. She did have her Batman moment, which I know is a very hot topic of discussion right now, but we're not going to be talking about Robert Pattinson beating criminals to a pulp endlessly. As great as that would be, we're not going to talk about it. No, we're going to talk about this show. And of course, guys, if you are new here, weird video to be, starting on, given the fact that it is a season 2 finale recap of a television show. But listen, if you are watching NOS4A2 and you like all that, and you like having a discussion about the show afterwards, we have an entire catalog of recaps that you can go through. So definitely consider subscribing to the channel for more TV recaps and stuff of that nature and other film related coverage. So and then also be sure to let us know your thoughts and opinions on tonight's finale down in the comments section below. We will be reading it. We'd love to hear from you guys every week, and we'd love to hear what you all think of the episodes. It's actually the past couple of weeks, you guys have been really lively down there, bringing up some great points, having amazing theories, and just talking about. I think universally, everyone sort of agreeing on the fact that the back half of this season has really been impressive. There's been a few, hit or miss moments, but I think people are really digging it. And so now it all comes to a head with the season 2 finale. And without further ado, Mike, what'd you make of the season 2 finale?
Really good, really solid finale. In fact, I would say it was better than the penultimate. I think a lot of people, and I kind of noticed even in the comment section of our episode 9 recap, we're saying it was the best episode, and I think I like this one more. I think this is kind of what I liked about the show, is that it's a good mix of action and character pieces, because we've often talked about when those slower episodes come and it's all character development, and you kind of go, okay, it's important, but nothing really happened. And then last episode was a great example of so much happening, and yet, or how did I put it? A lot of things occurring, but nothing really happening. Right.
Yeah,
and that was kind of it. It was eventful, but ultimately it didn't necessarily mean anything until we got to this one. So if I may, I'll tell you what I liked about this episode kind of via omission. And that was the fact that Bing's storyline was nice and tidy, and they didn't revisit it. They weren't tempted to do it to show us anything about him possibly escaping or anything. I know you and I have both been a fan of Olaf's acting, Bing's character. Yeah. We liked some of the moments he had, and you especially had said, I kind of want a clean break with Bing for now, and they gave us that. And I think that was one of the best things they've done this season, where they kind of went, okay, that's behind us, that's concluded, let's tidy up some of these other bits, because I think there are a lot of other shows that may have been tempted in the last 2 episodes to give us something else. And I think it's great that we just kind of left it behind us. So that was one of my favorite things, ironically, where I went, that was good that they didn't touch on that again.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, because it was one of my favorite parts too, because I feel like in a lesser show, they would have revisited it. They would have included it in the finale because he's a big part of the show. But they didn't need to. I mean, it's just like, it's sort of like, the Joker in The Dark Knight, where it's like he's just sort of left there dangling, and he's done. We don't need him in the final confrontation and everything. And if the show were to end with this season, his arc is neatly tied up in like, there's no need to explore it. But again, if they wanted to revisit it and open that can of worms back up later down the road, I feel like there are things you could do with his character that would be interesting. You know, maybe the notion of, can someone be redeemed after a life of wickedness? Right. That's probably the next logical step of where you would take that character, but they don't need to with this. It was all the better for it, for sure. But I think I'm going to agree with you. I do think I preferred this episode to the penultimate. And weirdly enough, you know, you were talking about this last week, kind of how you would have preferred the first half of this episode to sort of be the last half of season 9. But I think we spoke too soon, because honestly, what you were saying last week about you were afraid there wasn't going to be enough action in this finale, that first half of this episode was all action. It was the final confrontation of Manx. It was escaping Christmasland. It was getting Wayne out. It was getting Maggie out, you know, who's freaking out because she lost her tiles. And I actually thought for this show can surprise me, but never really in this way. I actually thought that Maggie was done for a second. I thought she was going to die in several moments during that the first half of this finale. So I was pleasantly surprised to be kept on my toes here, which, you know, when this show does, they do it beautifully. So yeah, that stuff was all really great. And then the back half obviously felt like a true, you know, season finale, wrapping up the story threads that were going on in this, planting the seeds for, you know, what's going to happen going forward if there is a season 3, and so on and so forth. So yeah, I think I'm trying to remember the season 1 finale, but I think this one felt a little bit more confident, and it felt I don't know, it felt tidier, I guess is the right word. You know, yeah. I don't know.
No, that's a good way of putting it, because we had kind of touched on it before we even started recording, where we had said, you know, it was interesting how they kind of set things up, but it could go either way. And we've talked about this the entire season. We don't know if there's going to be a season 3. I know we didn't know if there was going to be a season 2 by the time we wrapped up season 1 anyways, but you know, it gets to the point where we kind of go, it could go either way. And you had said one thing and I had said the other. I had said, it looks like they definitely set up season 3. And you said, but if it's over, it's going to be kind of wrapped up neatly, a little bit of a cliffhanger at some moments where you kind of go, oh, I wonder what's going to happen. But ultimately, everybody's story was wrapped up in an interesting way. And I kind of went, that's true. And that's tough, man, to find that.
That is really hard to do. Yeah, because I mean, you know, when you're doing a show like this, which isn't, you know, necessarily getting the numbers or the publicity of, like, you know, The Walking Dead or whatnot, you do have to sort of write with the idea of, you know, this could be our last season. And so it's like, if the show were to end here, obviously we as the creative team have more story to tell, but will the audience be satisfied with the conclusion here? And I think the thing I compare it to is either the first or second season of Stranger Things, where it's like, if there wasn't another season, I think they've wrapped everything up really well. But like, obviously there are seeds there that sort of like allude to where they could go in the future. And I think that they did that so well in this, without saying like goodbyes and without saying like goodbye and everything. And I believe you read the book, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So the interesting thing here is that, you know, it's the end of the Manx storyline, and Vic doesn't die, because Vic dies in the book.
Right.
So that was an interesting detour that we got here, probably because they're not finished with her story yet. I assume they want to do more with it, but I don't know. What did you like the sort of conclusion to the Manx Vic storyline? And, you know, even though obviously the show has been very different from the book, do you think it's okay that she made it through on the other side?
Yeah, I think because we had lost a little bit of the heart of the show with Chris just a few episodes before, we see that sacrifices have been made. You were talking specifically about Bing's redemption, but really, you know, it comes down to, well, this was Vic's redemption in a lot of ways too, right? That she was able to do this. And I think, truth be told, as much as we've talked about what could happen in season 3 and what we want to see happen in terms of this being the conclusion of the Manx storyline, or at least Charlie Manx, that who knows if this is really how that thread ends, right? We don't know, because there's so many funny things about the show. And of course, like we knew at the beginning of season 2 when they're all like, "Oh, Charlie Manx is dead." And we're like, "Is he though?" Like, come on.
No, yeah, he's not.
And it was the same kind of thing where we see the wraith being destroyed, but not completely. You know what I mean? Like
I don't know. It felt like they went out of their way to say the wraith is destroyed, Manx is cremated, the Charlie Manx that we know is dead and gone. And I think that was smart.
Yeah, the Charlie Manx that we know, because you remember, like even in an earlier episode, maybe even just the last episode, he was like, "What are you going to do? I'm immortal." And I don't think that was overconfidence. I think it was like a sense of, you can do whatever you want. I'm still going to be around one way or the other. So I hope, and we're already guessing about season 3, and I have no problem with that. I hope that this is no longer a Zachary Quinto show. And I mean that in respect of the growth of the show, because obviously he's the draw and he is so insanely good in that role. Yeah. But I just feel like, this is the time to move on and let this show kind of explore itself a little bit in terms of the other stuff, if in fact, again, they get a season 3. So it's the perfect time where we can maybe forget about Charlie for a little bit, and he doesn't need to be in the show, and then who knows what's going to happen. But yeah, I just found it's the, I don't know, the eternal cynic in me that basically when we heard, "Oh, what happened to the body?" "Oh, it was cremated." And I was like, was it though? Because like we didn't see it, we
didn't see it. So, they didn't need. Well, we didn't need to see it. I feel like that, Tabitha saying it, and then also like just seeing the wraith, like legitimately destroyed. I think put in it. It actually put the nail in the coffin for Charlie Manx here, which was smart because if they didn't, and it was like, oh, I thought for a second there, man, I really thought for a second that they were going to, we weren't going to see that stuff, that the kids were going to find Manx's body with the wraith there. And I was like, don't you do that. No, you kill him. He's not coming back. Do not do that, because then we're just going to repeat this whole thing all over again. And then the show just becomes cyclical. I'm so happy they didn't do that. I was really, really pissed. But yeah, obviously they've kind of ushered in Millie as being like, I guess the new antagonist in a way. Yes and no, because they opened a lot of doors here for where it can go. I think the stuff with Millie was really interesting because I don't know if I liked it, because it felt like her character did a complete 180 from where she was at in the previous episode. The previous episode, she was like, my father is evil. I got to get rid of him. I want to go out into the world, become my own person, enjoy, what life and womanhood has to offer. Everything her mother was telling her. And I feel like when we saw her in this episode, it was almost like she was mad at everyone for killing Manx and destroying Christmasland. It's like, no, you were instrumental in the destruction of it. You were like, no, this is a bad place. These people need to be free. I don't agree with this at all. And then her whole mindset just immediately changes. So that didn't work for me at all. I mean,
I think you're right. I think they kind of moved past it too quickly, where they could have once again, given her a couple episodes, or it just depends, like, again, how they set her up at the end of this episode to be the next Manx, to be this urban legend.
Continue the legend. Yeah.
Yeah. The immortal kid who kills, teenagers making out when they want to go see Charlie Manx's old house. But yeah, I think you're right. I think if they had spent, once again, a little more time to see that return back to, Christmasland was the best. Like, what was I thinking? Because you're right. It was such a quick turnaround from,
I didn't
McQueen, help me. I have to get out of here. She gets out, and then she's like, wait, what was I thinking? I don't know. Maybe it's the fickleness of children. But you're right. I think they spent more time where she kind of found out piece by piece, like the real world's not what she wanted it to be. And then she's like,
but she didn't even, but here's the thing. She didn't even see it firsthand. She hasn't even experienced it firsthand. So it's like, how can she even like say like, oh, it's just like, it sucks. I wish I hadn't done this, if she hasn't experienced it. That would have been an interesting, in a season 3, that would have been an interesting, thread to follow for her.
Yeah.
She's in the real world now. And now how does she acclimate? How does she, which I'm sure that's what they kind of alluded to that towards the end of this episode and stuff, that she's like surviving off of killing animals and people and whatever. She's like a vampire in the truest sense of the word. But I just don't, the resentment towards Vic just felt misplaced, because she was like, no, please destroy this. It's an awful place. And then it just, I don't know, that the turn there didn't quite work for me. But I mean, that being said, where they're going with her character, I can get behind. It's just, it wasn't originally where I thought it was going to go. And yeah, I don't know if it quite worked. And they did that a few times, kind of rushed through stuff. Like the, I guess like Lou and Tabs just figuring out that the ornaments are Horcruxes.
Right.
Like that just felt like a little abbreviated and like, well, no, we just have to destroy the ornaments because they're like these Harry Potter things. It just, it just, and I understand that Maggie's tiles kind of alluded to that beforehand, but
did they really? Like, that was very cryptic, right?
It was very cryptic. And also, like, I feel like they put it together like that.
Yeah.
Listen, they're two smart people, obviously, but still, it's like, I felt like they could have. I don't know. Now we're just rewriting. That's stupid, but it doesn't matter. It was just one of those things where I was like, it's a little convenient.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know how you felt on that, but
yeah, no, I totally agree with you. Yeah, but it's again, our good friend of the show, Jamie O'Brien, wrote this episode, right? So I have faith in. This was one of those things where a couple things she might have had to just wrap up as quickly as she could. No,
100%. And actually, I do want to say, bringing up the fact that she wrote the episode, I think it was one of the more confidently written episodes out of the entire season. Yeah. Because you're right. Anytime someone's tasked with, writing the finale, it's like, okay, what do we have to do to sort of wrap this whole thing up here? So, and I thought she actually did a really, really solid job with that.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And yeah, it's tough. And like we said, being in flux, and I mean, they have no idea, not only because of the pandemic, because of production, but just if the show is going to be around or not. So yeah, like we said, finding that balance of, well, things could still go this way or things are completely concluded.
Yeah.
So be it. So, okay, question for you then. What did you think about the storylines that they possibly set up? And I'll put it this way. We know that Wayne is still kind of infected to a degree.
it's like the Will Stranger Things thing. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Hey, who called that one? Last episode.
Right on the money. I didn't even think about it. And the second you said it, I was like, oh, that's the logical, that they can't go in any other direction.
It makes
so
perfect sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, and I'm kind of glad they did that. And I liked that they were kind of dealing with it, but not. It was a good roller coaster where it's like, we already start to see it. So it wasn't a cliffhanger like Mike in the first season of Stranger Things, but it was, we see the hints of it, and then we see a little bit of the healing between the mother and the son, but then we know that he's still not 100% there. So we get to see that in this episode, which I really liked. So they left that hanging a little bit. We know that Millie is still around and will possibly, be a killer or whatever. And most importantly, Maggie's storyline of her going into that, I guess it was kind of a knife in a sense, going into that hotel elevator and possibly going into the strong creative world.
Well, that's the thing. It's like, did she? Yeah, I agree with you there. That to me is the most interesting thing that they set up for season 3, because it's like, her encounter with the hourglass, I think, sort of like alluded to some of this, and then her going back to that hotel and then like going into the whatever they call, I forget what they called it, but I agree. Like it just feels like that truly opens up a realm of possibilities to explore the strong creative world. And maybe if they wanted to do a spin-off, then they could do a spin-off with her character, and like continue telling stories in this world separate from the McQueens and all this stuff. Because I mean, I feel like their story arc, their story aside from Wayne is kind of completed. And actually, speaking to that point, I know this is we're kind of bouncing all over the place. I loved the final moment, but the scene between Vic and her mother, where they're like unpacking Chris's stuff. That was so needed, because again, we were sort of touching on the fact that it felt like they kind of brushed over Chris's death at the beginning of that episode. was so needed in order to just like, everyone kind of reconcile with the fact that he's dead, and the decisions that he made, and like, her mom reflecting on, being a mother, how she could have improved, and then imparting that wisdom onto Vic. And, speaking of the motherhood thing, I felt like in this episode, it felt like the full sort of like come to Jesus moment for Vic. It's just, I finally saw like how she matured in motherhood throughout the entirety of this season. And like there are interactions with Wayne where she feels, she's stern. She's like doing everything a good mother should do. And then she's also being understanding, like when he has the drawings and stuff like that. And so I don't know what there were. I almost want to go back to what we were talking about at the beginning of the season, saying how like it feels like kids playing grown up. That I feel like that was purposeful now, because we've seen them now in those scenes being adults and doing whatever. And we've seen them in similar scenes towards the end of the season, faced with similar, I guess, obstacles, and they handle it like actual parents and actual grown-ups. And so like in hindsight, I think that was actually kind of a brilliant move on the writing team's part. So I'll eat my words for what I said earlier on in this season. I don't know if you feel the same, but
no, see, that's great that you kind of picked up on that. And that, and I think now looking back at that, you're probably right. It was purposeful. So yeah, good evolution, good arc. Did Jamie write the first episode as well?
I don't actually know.
Okay. Because that would be interesting, right? She definitely set that up. Yeah. Okay. So then last question for you, sir, because I will touch on this a little bit. What did you think was missing if you had anything to do with this episode?
I don't think anything was necessarily missing. Like, I think it did everything a good season finale should have. As it, again, touching on like the emotional aspects, like kind of sort of cleaning up some of the arcs, planting the seeds for season 3 and stuff like that. It had the action in the first half, and then the sort of like falling action in the latter stuff. Yeah, I really can't complain. It was a solid finale. It really was. I really don't have anything to add to that. You know
what I thought was missing? I wanted a little more Ghost Dad. So when they were crushing,
wow, I didn't even think about that.
Right?
Yeah.
I felt like that was the only story that didn't quite wrap up at all. Actually, I won't say quite wrapped up. It didn't do anything because that was the way they left the last time we saw Craig. It was like, he was like, no, don't do it, kid. Oh my God, kind of thing. And so we hadn't seen him and I think that's important because the focus of the story shouldn't have been on him. But when they're crushing the Wraith, perfect example. And they were all standing there watching this happen. And then they even did a close-up, I think, at one time of Wayne. And I went, okay, so this is it. He's going to see his dad like one more time. You know what I mean? Or maybe he just sees him like walking away in the distance, like he's at peace. Like it would have been super lame if he's like sitting in the car and he would have given him like a Ghost Dad nod, like, nice job, kid. It would have been lame, but I think they didn't deal with it at all. So that's interesting to me that maybe, again, purposefully open, maybe it was something they kind of forgot about, but that was one thing where I go, same thing. Like dads get a tough time in the show. They get killed, they get murdered in awful ways. Yeah. I'd hate to see what's going to happen to Lou next season if there is one. But, and then we forget about them. Then we leave them like dying in the road or like dead in the road like they did with Chris. Yeah. Or like Ghost Dad shows up and he doesn't really get anything accomplished and he's still like trapped, I guess, in that car. Anyways, so yeah, that was kind of funny, and that was one where I was like, "Oh, are they gonna do it?" And then they didn't do anything. And I went, "Okay." It's not super important that they did it. I just thought that would have been one nice little touch, or you just see a long-haired, kind of greasy-looking kid walk away from the car. I thought would have been enough of a like, "Oh, maybe that was him, and maybe not." Anyways, so that was the only thing.
I'm glad you brought that up because I completely forgot about Ghost Dad Craig. So I agree with you. Truthfully, Wayne's, strong creative abilities as a whole were kind of put on the back burner after he got to Christmasland and, obviously purposefully so. But I feel like that, again, that's probably stuff that they would explore in a season 3. Maybe we see more of Ghost Dad Craig in the season 3. I have no idea. But speaking of on Wayne, do you like everything that we're seeing from him? What did you kind of make of that encounter with Millie? Because I really liked that. He went back together. Yeah, when they were kind of like laying in the snow. I mean, that was like very Peter Pan. We've kind of been saying this a lot throughout the episode. There are sort of parallels to it.
Right.
But that especially, Wayne basically talking about, the real world sucks. It's like they say we're going to do all these great things and go visit the Wall of China and stuff like that. But really, it's just people who are busy and they don't make time for anything. And I thought that was just like such a true statement.
Yeah.
And it was, obviously coming from, the mouth of a kid, I think it carries a little bit more weight because it's just like telling us stuff that we, as adults, just kind of like, neglect to hear and whatnot. And so I don't know. Did you like that encounter? And then what do you think is going to kind of happen going forward with the two of them?
It's interesting because the show is never afraid to do time jumps, right? They even did another one in this episode where, they got out and Manx was dead, and then it was 1 month later. You could easily see, if there is a season 3, another jump where we have maybe a 13-year-old Wayne and I guess Millie would still be the same age, but you know what I mean? There's the actress who played Millie, we had said from season 1 to season 2 was phenomenal. The jump in terms of ability and confidence, she was so good this season, and she carries that old soul kind of weight. And I think if we start to see this kind of frenemy relationship, because Wayne was still kind of like, well, why don't you live with us and we can do this? And she was the one who was like, no, it sucks. We should go back to Christmasland. So in a sense, it almost seemed, what I liked is they didn't necessarily disagree with each other, and yet they're still kind of on opposite ends. And it could be that she starts doing more and more evil things, and he's kind of like, no, we can't do this. It just becomes a nice, interesting relationship between the next generation of McQueen and Manx that has a real connection to it, right? It could be really interesting. But I like that scene. And it's funny that you had brought up, if it weren't for the fact that that was a little rushed in terms of her returning back to her form to be an antagonist again. If she had kind of even had a moment where she was like, I'll think about it, and then she goes to live in the woods. So it wasn't so cut and dry of like, well, no, I'm not going to do that. Like Christmasland was the best. And we were like, well, no, you just said it wasn't the best last episode. Yeah. If they had even just given it a little bit more time where she was just like, I'll see how I can, we talked about this kind of motif of redemption with a lot of these characters, and it would have left a nice little thread about, can she be redeemed? And then ironically, then we see her at the end with the car scene and killing, that couple making out. It would have been kind of interesting, because then you would have been like, well, no, she doesn't really believe that there's redemption, or she's going to be good, or any, So maybe a missed opportunity, but we'll see what happens. And I think that relationship between the two of them could be super interesting. And I think a lot of, the show's done well in terms of balancing what they give these kids to deal with. So if the young actors can pull it off, I think that'd be kind of cool to see this friendship.
Yeah, I agree. And I really like you bringing up the generational thing, the next generation of McQueens and Manxes sort of carrying the torch going forward. And, because the thing with Millie is that they're like, oh, she's going to be the next Charlie Manx. She's going to be the antagonist, but she's not, she's different. She's very different from him. And so I don't know, her sort of evolution and then her dynamic with Wayne will be really interesting. I don't know. What do you think is going to happen with Wayne sort of going forward? I mean, obviously, we're just assuming that Charlie still has his teeth sunk into him because of what's happened and whatnot. But I don't know. Maybe there's I don't know. I feel like there's something else there. There's something a little bit more organic that feels like Wayne actually has actual feelings about this in terms of, and it's not so much that he's being manipulated, it's not mind control or whatever.
To continue the metaphor that they've always done throughout the show, there has to be a moment where he truly grows up, where he realizes, because, Millie had it she had a father who gave him or her, everything she wanted, eternal youth and candy and friends and, all this kind of stuff. And it's in a twisted way. But she grew up, and even though that moment didn't last too long, that was clearly what the metaphor is. And so there could be that with Wayne for sure, because they kind of touched on it, and they had a really nice little dialogue between he and Vic about, sometimes there are things that we really want to do that feel good that we shouldn't do. Right.
Yeah.
And we saw at the end that she, in a sense, had grown up, because we thought, oh, is she reaching for the bottle at the end? Oh, no, it's the paint supplies and the drawing supplies.
Yeah, I loved that scene so much, because really that was like, she replaced her coping mechanism. It's like, yeah, it's just, it was so great. I feel like everyone by the end of the season had gone through like such a mature, they'd gone through so much growth and maturity, and it felt like all of these arcs really came to a nice sort of like closure. Like there was closure on it, but while still not closing the door entirely, which I definitely loved. But okay, Mike, any final thoughts before we wrap this recap up? No, I mean, really solid season, really good, and there were maybe only 2 episodes that I thought were quote unquote weak. You know what I mean? Where I just went, oh, they could have changed this. So I liked what they did with this, and I'm hopeful they will get a 3rd season, because I hope so. Yeah, they might.
Yeah, for sure. And I hope they kind of take it in these directions, away from the whole Manx thing, away from the whole Vic thing. And we know, because even in our conversation with Jamie, and we know, from reading the book and the original characters that popped up in the 2nd season, they're starting, they're starting to expand a little more away from the one book that Joe Hill wrote, even though he's a part of it. So this is kind of where I am a little more interested, because, it's kind of that thing, like, even with Dr. Sleep and The Shining, we have The Shining and it's like contained, but don't you want to know a little bit more about that world? Because it is fascinating. I find I'm the same way with this mythos, where I'm like, okay, now is their chance to kind of branch off and, in a sense, be their own thing, which I think this show will thrive with. So that's what I'm kind of looking forward to.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you there, and I think I'm okay with the fact that it didn't follow the book. I don't think it needs to. I mean, this, like, I feel like the altercations that happened in the book, they did them justice. They serviced them well. And now it can sort of like, become its own thing. It doesn't have to be, hindered by what goes on in the book. And so after seeing this, I feel like there are more stories to tell. There is more room they can go in future seasons. I mean, obviously Maggie, basically becoming the detective that she's always wanted to be in her own world, in the creative world. Like that's, I feel like there's so much possibility. The possibilities are really endless for that one. So yeah, I agree with you. I thoroughly enjoyed the season. I think it was better than the first. It was more confident. The writing was more consistent, and they managed to bring the emotions when they needed to. So really kudos to everyone involved with this. If this is the final season, I think it's a really good 1-2 punch of a show with the season 1 and season 2. I hope it's not. Keep tweeting about it, people. Keep watching it and spreading the love, introducing people to the show. I think it's something that, interesting, sort of, going off of the child sort of metaphor there. It's a show that really, I guess, has sort of kind of grown up to the point where we're at right now. And I can't wait to see, like, how it continues to grow and whatnot. So, but guys, again, the most important thing is, what did you all think? We want to hear your thoughts and opinions down in the comment section below. Thank you for joining us throughout this entire season. We love chatting with you, and we love doing these recaps and, engaging with you in the comment section. So again, interact with us down in the comments as always. Mike, thank you for joining me on another great round of recaps for NOS4A2. Where can everyone find you for the last time? As usual, you can find me on all the major social under Real School with 2 E's, and on FilmSpeak, because FilmSpeak.net is rolling right along with all these our new team of writers. And more importantly, this might be my last chance, at least on the recap show, to say that my new podcast, Vocal Cues, will be coming out in the next few weeks, where I talk to some of the more prolific voice actors from animation and voiceover work and all this kind of fun stuff. So if you're into animation, I've already interviewed some legends of the business, and this podcast will be launched
hopefully in the next few weeks, where we're kind of working on it and chipping away. But stay tuned to filmspeak.net for that too.
Yeah, and hopefully, you know, Zachary Quinto's lending his voice to Superman Man of Tomorrow, so hopefully we can get Zachary Quinto on the on the podcast as well, and then share that interview with all of you. But guys, if you haven't done so already, be sure to like this video, share with your friends, and subscribe to the FilmSpeak channel, where we like to say the conversation continues after the credits. This is just one extension of that, so if you love the interaction and the community that we have going on here, you're definitely in the right place, so consider subscribing. You can also like FilmSpeak on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, just search FilmSpeak, follow us on filmspeak.net, and then if you like me specifically and you like what I have to say, you can give me a follow on Twitter at Griff Schiller. All right, guys, thanks for tuning in for another great season of NOS4A2. Hopefully we'll catch you back here for season 3. But until we know for certain, this will be the end of our recap shows here. So thanks for tuning in again, and until next time, take care.